Hi, I'm Madi Weland Solomon. I'm here with Tom Alexander, and we're here at the DAM EU in London in June 2022. And it is my honor and pleasure to be able to have a conversation with you about taxonomy. The topic of this interview and the content of it is about building a user-centric taxonomy. Now, Tom comes from a long line of digital asset management, but not necessarily taxonomy. Can I open this to say, how did you get to become a taxonomist with cancer.org?
Well, I had actually spent about 10 years working at Getty Images as, it was called a search vocabulary editor, which, I guess under any other name is taxonomist. And I kind of cut my taxonomy teeth there. And so that was, starting with, back in 1999, a repository of around 60,000 images, which by 2009, when I'd left, was about 22 million images. So, and they'd gone into the, it started with kind of just creative, and then it went into the editorial kind of side of things, and, massive numbers of extra images. So I cut my taxonomy teeth there. I worked at Debenhams.com for a couple of years. That was exclusively internal search, but then I kind of mixed both of those disciplines together when I started at Cancer Research UK 11 years ago. So it's been a nice kind of sort of folding together of those disciplines at Cancer Research UK. So that's how that's come about. I from memory, there were about 5 or 6 people at Cancer Research UK who were taking on the role of a taxonomist, a little bit of their role each, and they decided there was a business case to have a full-time person. So that was me. So yeah, it's been a great journey, and been really enjoying moving out from kind of creative kind of industries at Getty Images and retail at Debenhams to now working in the third sector, and it's been quite a big learning curve. Sort of, if you think back to being at Getty Images, you have these assets that need they kind of rely exclusively on the metadata and the taxonomy in order to be found. And when I came to Cancer Research UK, I was dealing with it in a new dimension with web content, because if you imagine a web page has the copy on it, the copy can form part of the search. So you're looking for things that are inside the actual text, and that just puts a whole different spin on things. So that has been a big learning for me at Cancer Research UK, and applying the things I learned at Getty Images, and sort of taking that to Cancer Research UK has been, I've learned an enormous amount. So yes, looking back, it feels like it's actually made sense. At the time, you kind of think, oh gosh, I'm off to do this and I'm off to do that, and actually now I see how it's all kind of gone together in quite a sort of, quite a good sort of flow.
Yeah, there's a logic to the progression
totally.
of where you are.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about managing digital assets and images, and now to adding content as well at cancer.org, what other kinds of sort of assets is the taxonomy being used for?
So we use our taxonomy across digital assets. So we have a sort of repository that we call the Asset Hub. There's about 14,000 digital assets, and they're split into things like photography, imagery, guidelines. There's 1 or 2 videos, but not that many at the moment on there. And then other things like enterprise content in SharePoint, web content on cancer.org, and even some intranet content. I've had some work that I've done on the taxonomy there. So there's really quite a lot of different content types. It's interesting because I refer to it as the taxonomy. Actually, there's more than one. The way that everything is set up is I work in the native function of these different platforms. So we currently have our website on 2 versions of Drupal. We have a separate digital asset management system. We have SharePoint, and we have intranet that's on another version of Drupal again, and they don't talk to each other. So I have to manually kind of spool up these different taxonomies. So they're separate, but at the moment my job is to make sure that they're kind of as in sync with each other as possible. But we do have, and I can talk about this perhaps sort of as we chat. We do have aspirations to kind of properly manage this from a central place, because I think that will bring a lot of user benefit.
Absolutely, that's part of what a taxonomy function is.
100%.
So let me take you back 11 years.
Yeah.
You said that when you arrived at cancer.org, there was a few who were doing it part-time, and they decided to really invest in a taxonomist.
That's
So
right.
what was the state of the taxonomy when you arrived?
So the taxonomy was for what there was. It was kind of quite carefully sort of thought about. It's just that there wasn't the it just wasn't being used very much, and it hadn't been developed to be it just wasn't sort of being used across that much of our content. So the thing that I've kind of brought to it is to kind of really champion the use of the taxonomy, and that's quite a job. One of the key things that I've sort of disciplines or whatever that I find out I really have to do, and I'm sure any taxonomy person would talk about this, is to really bang the drum. You have to set up your stall, and you have to get out there, and you have to kind of demonstrate to people that there's value in what you do, and value in what a taxonomy can bring. The holy grail is that you get to this point where you have a common language that is used on any piece of content, that can be centrally managed and can make it really easy to find, access, reuse, sort of give interoperability perhaps with external standards or whatever, and give a comprehensibility. There's a taxonomy term acts as a proxy to the content that it's attached to, and it should be something that's really, really simple for someone to look at and immediately understand what that means. That is obviously the kind of end point, and there is no end point, so you're constantly iterating and moving to the point where you're making it work as hard as possible. So for me, where the taxonomy was at that point, we were using a tool called Multi-Tes, which is like a very low cost taxonomy tool that it's very good for building structures, but it wasn't it was attached to the content, but then there was no interface to actually go in and look for things. So you were building things almost in this sort of I don't know what the word is, almost in the abstract. So you were giving it a structure, but it wasn't wired into anything. And I think what Cancer Research UK wanted from me was to start to turn it into something that is tangible, that behaves in a useful way, so that people can go to a system, query it, interrogate it, and then find what they're looking for. So in that time, we've kind of developed it so that for example, since I've been at Cancer Research UK, we went from using an Oracle-based system for our website, and now we've gone on to Drupal. So I oversaw having that taxonomy function kind of brought out from Multi-Tes into the taxonomy function in Drupal. So the website, before I was there, you didn't have a topic-based taxonomy, because that only lived in Multi-Tes, and Multi-Tes wasn't wired into the website. So my work has been to kind of take that goodness and that value, make sure it's sort of all happening in Drupal, and then in Drupal, then now you can go onto the website and you can find content via that taxonomy. So yes, it's come a long way in 11 years, kind of in a short version.
Well, I think you say something that's very important right there when you talked about having a taxonomy that used to be developed in a vacuum or in the abstract, that was meant to help people find digital assets or content. But what you needed to find out is how to get people to use it and how to capture their vernacular.
That's right.
In your excellent session today that I enjoyed being there, was you mentioned that you had several tactics that you used in order to get users involved and to get them to sort of co-create that taxonomy with you.
Yeah.
And one of them, I'd love for you to talk to the folks who weren't able to be there, was your guerrilla testing.
Oh yes, yeah. Well, that is one of the, it's one of those kinds of user testing that I really love because it's simple but it's effective. I had not heard of the expression guerrilla testing until probably about 6 years ago, which is kind of coincidentally when we got our asset hub. Somebody who I used to work with at Cancer Research UK, he was doing some user testing and he just wanted to find out a simple, do you prefer A or B? Some feature on a part of the website, or it may have been an intranet, I can't remember now. But this guy, back in the day when we were sort of, all in the office, he wandered around our old office over in Angel with his salmon-coloured laptop and just kind of very disruptively kind of just produced this page and said, which do you prefer? And then there was something about that I loved because it was, there was no standing on ceremony. It was, I need to get some information in a very friendly and polite way. I'm going to go up and ask people. And so guerrilla testing, that's where I was first introduced to it. We did our guerrilla testing for our digital asset management work online. So we had to kind of transpose wandering around in an office with a laptop into, well, how can you do this over Teams? And so we just, we invited participants as part of our user testing, and we just produced a very simple screen grab that just had, would you prefer option A or option B? And it's quite sort of simple, but it was just, it was derived from the feedback we'd got around the category term initiatives, and people didn't understand what that meant. It didn't mean anything. And we didn't want to assume that you just keep on using it just because it's there kind of thing. So that was what we did our guerrilla test with. We wanted to see if the existing term of initiatives was better or worse than a suggested new term of capabilities. No, sorry, not capabilities, campaigns, began with C. And so we did our guerrilla test that way. And just simply gave a choice of the two, and it came back as it turns out 94% for campaigns and 6% for initiatives. So on the strength of that, it was fairly emphatic. Yeah.
Very good. Talk about user-centric taxonomy. Excellent. I have a couple of rapid-fire questions for those taxonomists who are listening.
Yeah, sure.
How many terms in your taxonomy?
So we have about 5,000 terms in our core taxonomy. I'll add some caveats. There are synonyms against some of those, not all of them, because of the fact that things are managed in different platforms. There are some synonyms against terms in some of the platforms, but not others, because there isn't a synonym function. And there are some, so if you go into SharePoint, there is a function in the taxonomy kind of screen called reuse. And so what that allows you to do is you can have a master kind of list or a master stack of terms, and then you can use the reuse function. Let's say there's a team who they want to set up a page about sustainability, and they're going to put content in there to do with sort of sustainable actions that you can take, at Cancer Research UK. They will not need to have some of the terms that are in use in other spaces. Mm-hmm. So someone might have scientific data that might need cancer types, but you don't need to use that in your sustainability space. So the reuse function allows you to kind of reuse the terms that already exist in the master stack. But by and large, that's it's sort of 5,000 plus a few other bits.
Well, that's a large taxonomy.
Yeah.
And so finally, what's the future of the taxonomy at cancer.org? Well, what's up your sleeve now?
So I alluded to something a little bit earlier around an ontology and about a centrally managed set of terms that live in a sort of a standalone tool. And that's where we'd like to take things to. At the moment, as I've mentioned, working with taxonomies that are in the native function of multiple platforms means that with the best will in the world, you're introducing the possibility of sort of human error, because it's down to me to manually synchronize all of these separate places. So what we would like to do is kind of using COPE, so create once, publish everywhere, use a tool that sits centrally and then APIs into all of the areas where there is any content or assets or any kind of data or information. And so we would like to take our taxonomy out into an ontology and start to be able to centrally classify all of our stuff. And that will encompass digital asset management, knowledge management, sort of best practice for classification for web content, scientific data, and maybe even unknown unknowns. Maybe there's stuff floating around that would do well to be classified in that system that at the moment we may not know about. That's where we'd like to take it to. And the benefit we would like to get from that would be, first and foremost, it would be the ability to deliver some really big ticket projects. So there are projects that we're doing at Cancer Research UK around personalisation, sort of omnichannel. There's a project that we're doing around re-engaging with our supporters. So if you imagine a supporter might have, may sort of, from time to time may donate or may sort of engage with us. We want to kind of move them out to being like a kind of a committed supporter or committed giver. In order to do that, we need to engage them using relevant and sort of using business logic bits of content that can help us to tell them about our story, and then we can sort of work and develop that relationship to the point that they are a committed giver. In order to do that, we need to have an ontology where we've set those sort of business rules so that we can, without introducing any noise, we can sort of push relevant content to that supporter, and an ontology will allow us to sort of give a high quality sort of selection of content to that supporter. And also an ontology allows you to define the relationship between terms. So at the moment we use a taxonomy that is a classical kind of parent and child, but the relationship is always a fixed, broader term and narrower term. With an ontology you can move that into this new sort of schema of being able to actually define the relationship between things, and set up kind of multiple polyhierarchies and just open it out into a world where you have much more flexibility and much more ability to kind of engage with your audience. So the big ticket thing there is kind of supporting really, really large and strategically important projects. The other thing is better efficiency, because then I will make a change to a term in a central place, and that will sort of copy across into all the places where that term is used, as opposed to having to visit each repository and sort of basically double up on my work. So that's where we'd like to take it to. One of the, sort of bringing it back to digital asset management, one of the reasons why we really wanted to go deep into understanding our users via the taxonomic structure, is to improve the way that it works in there now. But the other thing is it's kind of future friendlyifying it, if that's a word. It's making it more future friendly, because we are actually structuring our content. We're moving away from some of the kind of flat text structures that we kind of started off with in that system, and we're moving that out to a structured sort of set of terms, so that when we then start to do our more sort of future-facing work, we've already gone a part of the way of that journey by structuring the content that's inside our asset hub. So yeah, that's the kind of thing we want to do in our sort of future-facing things, and it's been great to hear some of the other talks and presentations today when people start to talk about headless, because we are looking at a new CMS. So we've had Drupal for 8 or 9 years. We're looking at a headless system. And so therefore, we can really see a big benefit there if you're sort of splitting away your core CMS function. You can then have your taxonomic or ontological function kind of split away, and that will API into your CMS. And so, we are starting to build ourselves into that kind of new place that we'd like to be.
Well, thank you for sharing that journey with us, because I know there are many who are also taking it, and I think you're absolutely right. It's no longer about one platform. It's really about lots of different platforms, and they all need to talk to each other in order to begin to automate. And the taxonomy becomes the first backbone. And now you're going off and making an ontology, which is just a whole cell, isn't it?
Absolutely right, yeah.
Thank you for taking the time out today to talk to us, and to me it was a real pleasure. Thank you, Tom.
No, and thank you very much for having me. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.